Today we'll be explaining Lieutenant Cassian, an Adeptus Astartes of the Ultramarine chapter and his tragic story. This video will primarily cover the events that take place in the novella Crusade by Andy Clark. I'm actually reading through this now and I'm going story by story. It's a collection of different short stories, so I think my next video will be in The Lost King. But yeah, this is the first proper video of my new channel, Radio Blade Explains. My main channel, Radio Blade, is where I post gaming videos and other projects, and the channel you're currently watching is my second channel repurposed for lore videos like this one. Since this channel's in its early days, please consider subscribing and liking the video to grow the channel. It really definitely helps. So again, I want to make it clear that this video is not a substitute for Crusade. It's a great novella and I highly recommend you give it a read, as it's the best way to learn the story the way the author intended. But I do understand that you guys might have busy lives, so this video may be a better way for you to learn about the lore of Lieutenant Cassian. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Peranine for allowing me to show excerpts from his reading of Crusade. I'll leave that reading linked at the very top of the description for anyone who wants to give it a listen. With all that out of the way, let's look into the story of Lieutenant Cassian, the battle for Kalides Prime, and the rotting reign of the Lord Contagion Gurloch. Cassian did not begin life as a regular human. From birth, he was a space marine. He was created as one of the new transhuman warriors created by Archmagos Dominus Bellis. What the fuck is that name? Created by Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call at the command of the returned Primarch Robert Gilliman. Unlike other Space Marines who started life as normal people who were inducted as children and forced into Space Marines, he was created as one. From what we know, he served a normal career, well, as normal as a Space Marine's career can be. His service during the Battle of Kalides Prime, which is what I'll be focusing on in this video, was near the beginning of the Indomitus Crusade in the 41st millennium. The Indomitus Crusade was a galaxy-spanning campaign launched by the resurrected Primarch Robert Gilliman in the wake of the Great Rift's birth during the era Indomitus. With the Imperium split in two by the Great Rift, Gilliman marshalled vast fleets, armies, and the newly created Primaris Space Marines to reclaim lost worlds. In his service to the Crusade, Cassian was ordered to destroy the flesh cults that had overthrown the Imperium's rule on Knossa, and was given command of his own Primaris forces, as well as the strike cruiser, the Primarch's Sword. Alongside Shipmaster Aether, the Primarch's Sword fought successfully, and the planet of Knossa was liberated from the Chaos cults. With no time to celebrate the Primarch's Sword's victory, they took flight to rejoin the Crusade. However, before they could make much progress, the Primarch's Sword was caught by a devastating warp storm. It was vital that they made it out this warp storm and to safety, as the ship was taking heavy damage. Once they'd finally managed to return to normal space and take a moment to breathe, they found that they were now stranded in the Kalides system. With the damaged Primarch's Sword unable to enter the warp, Cassian consulted with Librarian Charitrius and Chaplain Demetrius on their best course of action. After much consideration, it was decided they would go to the nearby Imperium planet, Kalides Prime, so they could repair the Primarch's Sword and rejoin the main forces of the Indomitus Crusade. Upon arrival at Kalides Prime, they were horrified to find that the planet had been overrun by a Death Guard invasion, led by the likes of Chaos Lord Gurloch. Gurloch was Lord of Contagion of the Death Guard's Third Plague Company, and he was extremely old. In fact, he'd been fighting in the Horus Heresy thousands of years ago. So the Primarch's Sword has pulled up to one of their planets and found it in a plague-ridden state, without much clue what happened, so I'll take a moment to explain what's been happening in Kalides Prime before the Cassian Space Marines arrived. Gurloch was under the command of Plague Lord Morbidius, who sought to conduct a chaos ritual that would allow the Death Guard to use the machinery of the Astropathic Choir to send a plague across other choirs throughout the Imperium. An Astropathic Choir is a psychic communication hub used by the Imperium for long-range communication. It consists of multiple astropaths who are specialized psychers working together. By combining their mental power, they are able to amplify a message and broadcast it across the vast distances of the galaxy. However, Morbidius wants to use it to somehow spread the plague and rot by transmitting it to other Imperium planets. Morbidius chose to begin the ritual on Kalides Prime, and used his fleet to destroy the Imperial Navy warships defending it. The fleet then bombarded the world's capital, Dustrius, with ordnance laced with diseases that spread across the world and began the Chaos Ritual. After the success of taking the planet, Morbidius led his fleet out of the system, but charged Gurloch and his warband with claiming Dustrius' Astropathic Choir. However, in order for the ritual to be successful, Gurloch needed to draw out the suffering and misery of the Imperials on Dustrius. Well, any that survived the Death Guard's bombardment. When Gurloch and his warband landed upon Dustrius, the Cadian 44th Regiment's general, Yorin, led what remained of the Cadian 44th against Chaos invaders. Unfortunately, the disease unleashed by the Death Guard not only sickened the regiment, but also caused the capital's dead to rise as poxwalkers, which fell upon the surprised guardsmen. The Cadian 44th was soon overwhelmed, and thousands of guardmen were killed, including Yorin and the regiment's upper command. This led Captain Zanks Oh my god. How do you pronounce that name? It's easy when I read it in my head, but see, I actually need to read it out loud. Oh, there's a Zansk. 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 This led Captain Zanks to become the Cadian 44th's only remaining officer, and he quickly ordered the ragged remains of the regiment to retreat in order to strike back against the Death Guard later. After regrouping, Zanks led repeated attacks to harass the Death Guard and break the invaders' bombardment of the force field protected fortress, which held Kalides Prime's astropathic choir. These attacks did little to disturb the Death Guard's attempts to seize the fortress, and cost the Cadian 44th a high number of lives. Sickened and fighting with rapidly dwindling supplies, the regiment's end seemed near, until a sign of hope arrived, the Primarch's sword. Due to the warp storm's damages, Cassian and his crew had no way of contacting the Greater Crusade. They would need to use the astropathic choir, which was unfortunately in the hands of Gurloch, because he was using it for his ritual. Zanks quickly made contact with the Ultramarines and told Cassian what had happened since the invasion began. Afterwards, Cassian told Zanks that a warp storm had driven his force's damaged strike cruiser off course, and the Ultramarines needed to reach the besieged astropathic choir in order to inform the Indomitus Crusade of their location. Zanks had no idea what the Indomitus Crusade was, but after being informed that its goal and that it was being led by Lord Commander Guilliman, the captain was left in awe and offered the Cadian 44th's aid to the lieutenant. Cassian gladly accepted it, and informed their forces that he suspected the Death Guard were drawing out the battle as an offering to their chaos god Nurgle, as Gurloch's forces had the numbers to simply storm the fortress. The Strike Force's librarian, Kiritreus, agreed with this and said he felt the strength of the warp increasing in the capital. The astropathic choir seemed to be the key to Gurloch's plans, and in order to stop the ritual from succeeding, Cassian stated that they must retake the fortress instead of directly fighting the Death Guard, as their forces were vastly outnumbered. Cassian requested the 44th to stage a diversionary attack on the Death Guard, which would give the Ultramarines the time they needed to enter the fortress. Once they did so, the Ultramarines would send word of Gurloch's plot to the Indomitus Crusade, which would surely arrive with enough forces to destroy the invading Death Guard. Once he heard Cassian's plan though, Zanks claimed it would cost the 2nd Cadian 44th dearly, and they would not survive if the Death Guard attacked them in large numbers. Cassian assured him, however, that once the strike force arrived at the fortress, they would hold the gates open for as long enough for the regiment to reach safety within its walls. Zanks agreed to Cassian's plan, but knew the Cadian 44th's fate was sealed, as they'd been immersed within the Death Guard's diseases for too long. They could not risk spreading their sickness to the other people within the fortress, nor would the regiment make it off Kalides Prime alive. Nonetheless, Zanks rallied the 2nd Cadian 44th and roused their weary spirits for one final charge against the Death Guard, for Cadia and for the Emperor. As the attack began though, Gurloch saw through it, but the Contagion Lord knew he could use the Cadians' attack to draw more misery from them to empower the ongoing ritual. With that in mind, he personally led the attack against Cadians. Captain Zanks had stood back to organise the regiment's attack, but he could no longer listen to their death cries and took to the field. After telling Cassian the 44th would buy the Ultramarines as much time as they could before they fell, he then ordered his Chimera to charge the Death Guard and fired upon them, until a Defiler destroyed the vehicle. The resulting explosion sent Zanks flying from the Chimera's wreckage, and he passed out once he hit the ground. When he awoke, Zanks was alone, and he was mortally wounded. Despite this, he forced himself to stand and grabbed the Cadian 44th's regimental standard before making his way towards the sound of gunfire. Before Zanks had made it through, the Contagion Lord Gurloch appeared and barred his path. Surrounded by his bodyguards, Gurloch easily lifted the battered captain off the ground and congratulated Zanks on the Cadian 44th's efforts against his warband. Zanks' jaw was hanging off, his bones were mangled, however he wasn't giving up just yet. Gurloch took the time to gloat in aura farm, doing his best to cripple the resolve of Zanks before killing him. This moment is really damn cool, so I'm going to let you hear this moment uninterrupted the way the author intended.
He reached out and grasped the banner pole, plucking it from Zanks' hands as easily as taking a toy from a child. Gurloch cast the banner into the mud, then wrapped his fingers around Zanks' neck and hoisted him easily off the ground. The captain gurgled in agony as broken bones crunched together in his jaw, Gurloch's rust-metal fingers tightening on his windpipe and vertebrae. His good arm twitched and spasmed as he felt rot spreading through his flesh from the heretic's touch.
"I am done with your little soldiers,"
said Gurloch.
"I have wrung the last droplet of misery and pain from your husks. Now you will die, then the Ultramarines will die, and then, at last, I will be free to spread the blessings of Nurgle across the stars."
Zenk was dying, his tormentor's words echoing to him down a long, dark tunnel. His fingers twitched with the last flickers of his life. He felt them touch something. Cold metal. Pin. In his pain and bewilderment, he had forgotten. But now he remembered, and he wordlessly thanked the Emperor for this final gift. With his last breath, Captain Zenk summoned the strength to pluck out the pin and let it tumble slowly away. He went with it, drifting into darkness like an autumn leaf on the Partok's fields of home. He was already dead when the cracked grenades on his belt exploded.
The Contagion Lord then said he was done with the Cadians, and after he'd killed the Ultramarines, he would be free to spread the plague they created in Kalides Prime across the stars. By this time, Zax was near death, and lamented that he had no weapon to turn upon the gloating Gurloch, until his hand brushed against the cracked grenades attached to his belt. With the last of his strength, Zax pulled the pin from one of the grenades before passing it away. Though, one of Gurloch's bodyguards noticed this and hurled Zax's body away from the Contagion Lord, resulting in the explosion killing 3 of his bodyguards and gravely wounding Gurloch. An enraged Gurloch now sought to quickly end the battle and led his forces against the Ultramarines, which had been able to open the fortress gates. Gurloch used sorcery to emerge in front of Lieutenant Cassian, who had been leading the Ultramarines' rear guard. When they spotted each other, they both knew they were the commanders of each respective force, and in order to claim victory, Cassian led a charge directly at Gurloch. While their forces fought each other, Cassian and the librarian Kiratrius attacked the Contagion Lord, who advanced upon the librarian. Cassian intervened, but Gurloch repeatedly headbutted the lieutenant, which forced him to his knees. As the Contagion Lord raised his Plague Reaper to kill Cassian though, Kiratrius struck him with a psychic lightning blast, which caused him to drop the lieutenant. With a bellow, Gurloch charged the librarian, even as Kiratrius continually hit him with lightning. Due to his worship of Nurgle, however, Gurloch easily weathered the attacks and beheaded the librarian. This enraged Cassian, and the two flung themselves at each other in a whirlwind of blade strikes. However, Gurloch's poisoned blade began to weaken Cassian, and in desperation, he threw a bolter at the Contagion Lord. Gurloch reflexively blocked it, but this left open to Cassian's death blow that split his head in two, even as the Contagion Lord carved his Plague Reaper through Cassian's chest. Cassian was wounded beyond repair, and fell alongside Gurloch. Cassian had sacrificed so much for this victory, even himself. With Gurloch's death, not only did the ritual fail, but the spirit of his warband died as well. They were unable to seize the fortress after the Ultramarines entered it, and with that, the Death Guard's invasion neared its end. As the Ultramarines made contact with the Indomitus Crusade, which soon arrived in large numbers that easily wiped out Gurloch's warband. The Crusade's forces then destroyed the choir, and when Morbidius' fleet returned, they would find that Kalides Prime's atmosphere was now laced with explosive mines. However, even in Cassian's sacrifice, his story does not end there. Cassian awoke.
"Your body was ravaged beyond our abilities to restore. We saved only those parts you would need." "I would need?"
Cassian knew what they were saying, but even as the conditioned part of his psyche processed the revelation, another part of his mind was screaming in panic and trying desperately to move limbs that weren't there, flex muscles that didn't exist, and feel skin that he no longer possessed. You made a great sacrifice, brother. You gave up your body of flesh in the name of victory. These fine brothers have given you another, that you might continue to fight.
I am a dreadnought,
said Cassian, feeling a chill as the realization sank in. He was organs now. Biological component parts. A brain, hearts, lungs, veins, arteries, and vulnerable innards, bound within an amniotic weave and entombed within the armored sarcophagus of a Redemptor. Part of him felt pride, and a thankfulness that he was not dead. The other part tried to vocalize its claustrophobic horror. But with an effort, he strangled that voice into silence. Some warriors went mad upon internment within a dreadnought body. He would not shame himself by joining their number.
In the end, Lieutenant Cassian's valiant sacrifice was not rewarded with the peace of the Emperor's embrace. His mangled body was recovered from the filth of Kalides Prime, and for his heroism, he was granted the grim salvation of a Redemptor sarcophagus. But this was no peaceful slumber, it was a slow, waking torment. Entombed within the armoured shell, the very systems that kept him alive were also burning out what remained of his flesh, forcing him to endure constant white-hot agony. And so, the tragic tale of Lieutenant Cassian comes to an end, a story that perfectly encapsulates the brutal reality of the 41st millennium. His heroism was pure. He stared into the face of death and chose to sacrifice himself to save a world he'd only just discovered. But in the grim darkness of the far future, such a sacrifice was rarely rewarded with peace. Instead, Cassian was given eternal penance, his valiant final act earning him not the peace of death, but an unending existence of silent agony inside the machine. His tale is a grim reminder that in the Imperium of Man, true heroism is not defined by glory, but by a tragic, unending war against darkness that will never truly be vanquished. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Crusade and want to see more Warhammer lore explained in detail, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It really helps this new channel grow and lets me bring you more stories from the grim darkness of the far future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.